Zektar's forearms trembled as he stood before the Galactic War Council. The massive chamber, carved from a single piece of crystalline rock on the neutral world of Zarion Prime, held representatives from dozens of species. Each delegate sat in their species-specific atmospheric pods, but all eyes were on the scarred Catherian warrior who had requested this emergency session. The scars covering Zektar's chitinous exoskeleton told a story of countless battles. His compound eyes, usually a bright amber, had dulled to a sickly yellow since his return from the human front. Where once stood a proud veteran of 17 galactic conflicts, now stood a broken soldier who flinched at sudden sounds and refused to sleep in enclosed spaces. "Honored delegates," Zektar began, his translator device struggling to convey the tremor in his voice. "I come before you today not as a warrior seeking glory, but as a survivor bearing witness to something that will change how we view warfare forever." The Andromedan representative, a floating jellyfish-like being named Quell, pulsed with curiosity. "Soldier Zektar, your service record is exemplary. You have fought the crystal beings of Sectron, survived the poison wars of the Nebula Cluster, and led charges against the machine armies of the Synthetic Rebellion. What could possibly have shaken a warrior of your caliber?" Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously. "Humans," honored Quell. "I have fought beside and against humans, and what I witnessed defies every principle of warfare we thought we understood." A ripple of laughter echoed through the chamber. The Vorthon delegate, General Krex, leaned forward in his pod. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for amusement among his kind. "The humans? Those soft pink mammals from that backwater system? Zektar, surely you jest. They have no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no energy projection capabilities. They are barely more advanced than the primitive species we typically ignore." "That," Zektar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "is exactly what I thought before I met them in battle." The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the life support system seemed to quiet, as every delegate leaned forward to hear his words. "It began 18 cycles ago," Zektar continued. "During the border conflicts in the Tau Ceti sector, the hegemony had hired my unit, the Iron Talon Regiment, to help suppress a human colony rebellion. Standard pacification mission. Or so we thought. The humans had declared independence from their own Earth government and were mining restricted heavy elements. Simple enough. Go in, overwhelm their primitive defenses, capture their leaders, and restore order." Zektar paused, his breathing apparatus cycling faster as the memories flooded back. "Our intelligence reports showed a colony of perhaps 50,000 humans, defended by outdated plasma rifles and civilian mining equipment. My regiment alone consisted of 3,000 elite Catherian shock troopers supported by the hegemony's 5th Fleet. We expected resistance to last perhaps 6 hours. The crystalline representative, Shard of Morning Light, chimed in with harmonious tones. "And instead, we walked into hell itself." Zektar's compound eyes seemed to lose focus as he stared at something only he could see. "The first sign something was wrong came when we entered the system. Our advanced scouts simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. Command assumed equipment failure and sent a full reconnaissance squadron." He gestured with one of his upper arms, and a holographic display materialized in the chamber's center. The image showed a star system with a single habitable planet, surrounded by asteroid fields and mining stations. "They found the scouts," Zektar continued. "Or rather, they found what the humans had done to them. Each ship had been disabled with surgical precision. The crews were alive but unconscious, and every piece of military hardware had been removed or sabotaged. The humans had somehow boarded our vessels in the vacuum of space, neutralized trained warriors without killing them, and stolen our technology." General Krex scoffed. Impossible. Humans lack the physical capabilities for such operations. They cannot survive in space without bulky environmental suits, and they have no natural weapons to speak of. That's what we thought too, Zektar replied grimly. So we attributed it to some unknown alien ally and proceeded with the invasion. 3,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors, supported by orbital bombardment platforms and atmospheric fighters, descended upon a single human colony. The holographic display shifted to show the surface of the planet, a harsh, rocky world with deep canyons and towering mesa formations. Scattered across the landscape were typical human settlements, domed cities, industrial complexes, and mining operations. The bombardment was supposed to soften their defenses, Zektar explained. We targeted their military installations, power plants, and communication arrays, standard procedure to minimize civilian casualties while crippling their ability to coordinate resistance. His voice took on a haunted quality. But when our energy beams struck their targets, nothing happened the way it should have. Where we expected to see explosions and debris, we saw only small puffs of smoke. Our scanning equipment registered direct hits, but the damage was minimal. It was as if the humans had somehow absorbed our attacks. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The possibility of a species developing energy absorption capabilities was terrifying to civilizations that relied on energy weapons. The fleet admiral ordered a closer scan, Zektar continued. What we discovered changed everything. The humans hadn't absorbed our energy. They had redirected it. Every structure we had targeted was surrounded by a network of crystalline collectors and reflectors, all made from the very heavy elements they had been mining. Our bombardment wasn't destroying their defenses. It was charging their weapons. Delegate Quell's form pulsed rapidly with alarm. They turned your own weapons against you? Worse, Zektar said. They had anticipated our attack patterns, studied our technology, and prepared accordingly. But that was just the beginning. The real horror started when we made planetfall. The holographic display zoomed in to show the landing sites. Catherian dropships descended toward the planet's surface, while smaller craft provided escort. My unit was assigned to capture the primary mining facility, Zektar recalled. Intelligence suggested it housed their command center. We expected to face perhaps a few hundred poorly armed colonists. Instead, we found ourselves in what humans call a killing field. His mandibles clicked rapidly now, a sign of extreme distress among his kind. The moment our ships entered the atmosphere, the humans revealed the true extent of their preparations. The ground itself erupted with weapons fire, but not from the locations our intelligence had identified. The entire canyon system had been turned into a massive fortification. Every rock outcropping, every shadow, every seemingly empty space concealed human fighters. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the canyon system, with red dots indicating weapon positions. There were thousands of them, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible approach. But the positions weren't what terrified us, Zektar continued. It was how the humans fought. Every other species we had encountered followed predictable patterns. The Sectronians charged directly at their enemies. The synthetics used overwhelming firepower. The nebula dwellers relied on stealth and poison. But humans adapted to us. General Krex leaned forward, his skepticism beginning to waver. What do you mean, adapted? They studied us during our approach, Zektar explained. They observed how we moved, how we communicated, how we coordinated our attacks. Then they changed their tactics in real time to counter everything we did. When we advanced in formation, they used explosives to break our lines. When we spread out to avoid the explosives, they picked us off with precision fire. When we took cover, they used weapons that could shoot around corners. The chamber had grown deadly quiet. These were seasoned military leaders from across the galaxy, and they were beginning to understand the implications of what Zektar was describing. My first encounter with a human soldier happened 3 hours into the battle, Zektar said, his voice barely audible now. I had become separated from my unit during one of their explosive attacks. I found myself in a narrow canyon, pursuing what I thought was a wounded human who had fled from our advance. He paused, his breathing apparatus working overtime. I followed the blood trail around a bend and found myself face to face with a human female. She was small, even by human standards, perhaps half my height and a quarter my mass. She wore simple camouflaged clothing and carried only a primitive projectile weapon. Zektar's compound eyes refocused on the assembled delegates. I raised my plasma rifle, confident in my superiority. I had 4 arms to her 2, natural armor plating to her soft skin, and a weapon that could melt through ship hulls. The engagement should have lasted seconds. The Andromedan delegate pulsed with anticipation. But it didn't? She smiled, Zektar said simply. This small, fragile creature looked at a fully armed Catherian shock trooper and smiled. Then she spoke in perfect Catherian dialect. You're exactly where I wanted you to be. The silence in the chamber was now complete. Even the life support systems seemed to hold their breath. The blood trail I had been following wasn't from a wound, Zektar continued. It was bait. She had led me into a carefully prepared position where my advantages meant nothing. The narrow canyon prevented me from using my superior reach. The rocky walls blocked my escape routes, and the shadows concealed at least 6 other human fighters, all with their weapons trained on me. He gestured weakly, and the holographic display showed the ambush site from multiple angles. But even then, they didn't simply kill me. The female, she said her name was Sarah, began to speak. She knew details about Catherian physiology that our own doctors would struggle to recite. She knew about our mating cycles, our social hierarchies, our psychological pressure points. She knew that Catherian warriors fear dishonor more than death. Delegate Shard of Morning Light chimed with confusion. How could they possess such knowledge? Humans have had no meaningful contact with your species before these conflicts. That's what terrified me, Zektar replied. When I asked her the same question, she explained that humans don't just fight wars. They study them. Before we ever arrived at their colony, they had intercepted our communications, analyzed our tactical manuals, and researched every species in our military alliance. They knew us better than we knew ourselves. General Krex's reptilian features had paled to a sickly green. Surely you exaggerate. No species could gather such intelligence in the time frame you describe. Sarah proved it to me, Zektar said. She recited my own service record, including classified missions that even I had forgotten. She knew about my clutchmates back on Kythera Prime, my military decorations, my fears and ambitions. She had somehow accessed our military databases and built psychological profiles on every single soldier in our regiment. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. If humans could infiltrate galactic hegemony databases so easily, no military operation could be considered secure. But the truly horrifying part came next, Zektar continued. Sarah offered me a choice. I could surrender and be treated with honor, or I could continue fighting and face what she called unfortunate consequences. When I demanded to know what those consequences might be, she showed me. The holographic display shifted to show footage from a Catherian helmet camera. The image was grainy and distorted, but it clearly showed a massive explosion in the distance, followed by the collapse of an entire section of canyon wall. My commanding officer had refused a similar offer, Zektar explained. The humans had somehow planted explosives throughout the entire canyon system. With a single command, they buried 30 of my unit's best warriors under tons of rock. Not killed, mind you, buried alive. The humans had calculated the exact amount of explosive needed to trap us without causing fatal injuries. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations from multiple species. The concept of such precise, calculated warfare was alien to most galactic civilizations. "I surrendered," Zektar admitted, his shame evident in every word. A veteran of 17 campaigns, surrendering to a creature I could have killed with my bare hands. But Sarah's next words made me realize I had made the only rational choice possible. He looked directly at the Vorthon general. She said, "Thank you for making the smart decision. We really didn't want to activate the nanobots we introduced to your food supply during the reconnaissance phase." General Krex recoiled as if physically struck. "Nanobots? They poisoned your food?" "Not poisoned," Zektar corrected. "Controlled. Every meal we had eaten since arriving in the system contained microscopic machines that could be activated by remote signal. Sarah demonstrated their capabilities by having them induce temporary paralysis in my left arm. She could have killed our entire regiment with a thought, but instead she chose to use them as a negotiating tool." The horrifying efficiency of such tactics was not lost on the military minds in the chamber. To introduce controllable nanobots into an enemy's food supply required planning, resources, and a level of biological understanding that most species took millennia to develop. "During my captivity," Zektar continued, "I learned more about human warfare than I had learned about combat in my entire previous career. Sarah and her colleagues treated me well, better than most civilized species treat prisoners of war. They fed me, tended my wounds, and even provided entertainment during my confinement." He paused, remembering. "But they also educated me. They explained that what we had experienced wasn't an aberration. It was standard human military doctrine. They called it asymmetric warfare, and they had been perfecting it for thousands of years." The crystalline delegate chimed with curiosity. "Thousands of years? But humans have only recently achieved interstellar travel." "That's the terrifying truth," Zektar replied. "Humans have been fighting wars among themselves for their entire recorded history, not just occasional conflicts over resources or territory, constant, evolving warfare that never truly ended. They have fought with sticks and stones, with chemical weapons, with nuclear devices, and with information itself as a weapon." The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. Most galactic species had unified their home worlds within centuries of achieving intelligence. The idea of a species that had spent millennia in constant internal conflict was disturbing beyond measure. Every human is born into a culture that views war as a science to be studied and perfected, Zektar continued. Their entertainment, their education, their very language is saturated with military concepts. They have phrases like "all's fair in love and war" and "victory at any cost" that reveal how deeply warfare has shaped their thinking. Delegate Quell pulsed with growing alarm. "And they have now turned this accumulated knowledge against us?" "Not against us," Zektar corrected. "They don't see us as enemies to be destroyed. That's perhaps the most frightening aspect of human warfare. They fight not to kill, but to win. Every tactic, every strategy, every innovation is designed to achieve victory with minimal casualties on both sides." The distinction was lost on many of the delegates, but the military representatives understood immediately. A species that could achieve total victory while preserving their enemies was far more dangerous than one that simply destroyed everything in its path. "Sarah explained it to me during one of our conversations," Zektar said. "She told me that humans had learned long ago that dead enemies cannot become future allies, and that the true goal of warfare is not destruction but resolution. They fight to end conflicts, not to perpetuate them." He gestured at the display, which now showed the aftermath of the battle. Instead of the devastation typically associated with military conquest, the images showed human medics treating wounded Catherian soldiers and human engineers working alongside colonist civilians to repair damaged infrastructure. Within hours of our surrender, human medical teams were treating our wounded with techniques more advanced than our own military hospitals possessed, Zektar continued. They had studied Catherian physiology so thoroughly that they could perform surgical procedures our own doctors considered impossible. General Krex spoke in a hollow voice. They planned not just for the battle, but for the aftermath as well. Every aspect was planned, Zektar confirmed. They had prepared medical facilities, temporary housing for prisoners, repair equipment for damaged systems, and even entertainment programs to maintain morale during the occupation. They had war-gamed not just our military response, but our psychological, medical, and social needs. The scope of such planning was staggering to species that typically approached warfare as a series of tactical engagements. The idea of considering the long-term consequences of every action was revolutionary. But the most disturbing revelation came during my final conversation with Sarah, Zektar said. I asked her why humans fought with such complexity when they possessed the capability to simply destroy their enemies. Her answer changed my understanding of warfare forever. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. She said, because war is not about who can kill the most, it's about who can think the most. And humans have been thinking about war longer than any species in the galaxy. The chamber remained silent as the full implications of Zektar's testimony sank in. Here was evidence that humanity possessed not just advanced military capabilities, but a fundamentally different approach to conflict that rendered traditional military thinking obsolete. Before my release, Zektar concluded, Sarah gave me a message for this council. She said that humanity seeks not conquest but coexistence, and that they hope their display of military capability will encourage diplomatic rather than military solutions to future disputes. Delegate Quell pulsed slowly. And what is your recommendation, Soldier Zektar? Zektar's compound eyes met those of every delegate in turn. That we listen to their message, because if what I witnessed represents even a fraction of human military capability, then we face not just a new species, but a new form of warfare that we are utterly unprepared to counter. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air as the council chamber fell into contemplative silence, each delegate grappling with the terrifying truth that the galaxy's understanding of warfare had just become obsolete. 3 standard galactic days after Zektar's initial testimony, the War Council reconvened in emergency session. The crystalline chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates huddled in their atmospheric pods, discussing the implications of what they had heard. Many had spent the intervening time reviewing classified military records, searching for any previous encounters with human forces that might have been overlooked or misunderstood. What they found only deepened their concerns. Zektar stood once again at the center of the chamber, but this time he was not alone. Beside him floated a containment pod holding the remnants of advanced technology that had been recovered from the human colony. The devices were small, seemingly innocuous, but their very presence made several delegates visibly uncomfortable. Honored representatives, began Admiral Thex of the Hegemony Fleet Command, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. After reviewing Soldier Zektar's testimony, we have conducted extensive analysis of similar encounters throughout the past 2 decades. What we have discovered suggests that humanity's military capabilities extend far beyond a single colonial uprising. The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of known space. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations throughout the spiral arm, each one representing a previously unexplained military incident or diplomatic resolution. The pattern, Admiral Thex continued, suggests that humans have been involved in galactic affairs far longer than we originally believed. Incidents that we attributed to equipment failures, rogue artificial intelligences, or unknown alien interventions now appear to bear the hallmarks of human involvement. General Krex, who had been noticeably subdued since the previous session, spoke up. Are you suggesting that humans have been conducting covert military operations throughout hegemony space? Not operations in the traditional sense, Admiral Thex replied. Something far more sophisticated. Analysis indicates that humans have been studying galactic military capabilities, political structures, and social systems for decades, possibly centuries. They appear to have developed what their military doctrine calls deep reconnaissance, the art of gathering intelligence so thoroughly that they understand their potential enemies better than those enemies understand themselves. Zektar gestured toward the containment pod. During my captivity, I was allowed to observe some of the technology the humans employed. What you see here represents only the smallest fraction of their capabilities, but even these fragments reveal terrifying possibilities. The pod's contents became visible as the containment field shifted to transparency. Inside were several small devices that looked deceptively simple. Metal cylinders no larger than a Catherian's finger, crystalline matrices that pulsed with faint light, and what appeared to be organic components that defied classification. The humans call these smart munitions, Zektar explained, but they function unlike any weapon system we have previously encountered. Each device contains what they term adaptive artificial intelligence, computer systems that can learn, modify their behavior, and even evolve new capabilities during deployment. Delegate Shard of Morning Light chimed with alarm. Evolving weapons? Such technology was banned by the Treaty of Universal Peace after the Synthetic Wars. The humans are not signatories to our treaties, Admiral Thex pointed out grimly. And their interpretation of artificial intelligence differs fundamentally from our understanding. Where we see weapons that might become uncontrollable, they see tools that can be directed toward specific outcomes with unprecedented precision. Zektar activated a recording device built into his translation unit. Sarah, the human soldier who captured me, provided a demonstration of these capabilities. With her permission, I am sharing that recording now. The chamber filled with the sound of Sarah's voice, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. What you call smart munitions, we simply call problem solvers. Each one is programmed with a specific objective and the ethical parameters to achieve that objective with minimal collateral damage. They're not weapons in your understanding of the term. They're precision instruments designed to create specific outcomes. The recording continued with the sound of Sarah's fingers manipulating controls. Watch this demonstration. I'm programming this unit to disable the weapon systems of a Type 7 hegemony combat drone without damaging its life support or navigation systems. Through Zektar's helmet camera, the delegates could see a small cylindrical device being released into the air. It moved with purpose toward a captured hegemony drone, attached itself to the hull, and began to emit a soft blue glow. Within seconds, the drone's weapon systems powered down, while all other systems remained fully operational. The device analyzed the drone's construction, identified the specific components responsible for weapon function, and generated a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that affected only those systems, Sarah's voice explained. The process took 14 seconds. A human technician with proper tools would require approximately 6 hours to achieve the same result. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The implications of weapons that could adapt to any target and achieve precise objectives without oversight were staggering. But that demonstration represents only the most basic application of human military technology, Zektar continued. During my weeks in captivity, I witnessed capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of warfare itself. He gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show the layout of the human colony from an orbital perspective. The installation where I was held prisoner appeared to be a simple mining operation. In reality, it was what humans call a fortress world, an entire planet converted into a military installation so sophisticated that it could defend itself against fleet-level attacks while appearing to be a civilian target. The display zoomed in to reveal the true scope of the human construction. Beneath the surface facilities, a vast network of tunnels, bunkers, and weapons emplacements extended deep into the planet's crust. The entire colony was essentially a single massive fortress disguised as a mining operation. Every building, every road, every seemingly decorative structure served a military purpose, Zektar explained. What we took for mining equipment were actually components of a planetary defense grid. The residential areas housed not just colonists but also manufacturing facilities for military hardware. Even the children's playground contained concealed sensor arrays and communication equipment. Delegate Quell pulsed with disbelief. An entire population living within a military installation? How could they maintain such deception? Because to the humans, there was no deception, Zektar replied. They do not separate civilian and military infrastructure the way we do. Every human citizen is considered part of their defensive capability, and every aspect of their society is designed to support their survival in hostile environments. The concept was alien to most galactic civilizations, which maintained clear distinctions between military and civilian populations. The idea of an entire society organized around military preparedness suggested a level of militarization that bordered on the pathological. Sarah explained their philosophy to me. Zektar continued. Humans believe that the best defense is not to appear defenseless while secretly being strong, but to appear so overwhelmingly prepared that potential enemies choose not to attack at all. They call this deterrence through visible capability. Admiral Thex's form flickered with concern. This suggests that the colony you encountered was not an isolated case, but part of a broader human strategy. Correct? Zektar confirmed. During my captivity, I learned that humans have established similar installations throughout their territory. Each one appears to be a peaceful settlement while actually being a military stronghold capable of independent defense. They have essentially created a network of fortress worlds that could coordinate their defense across vast distances. The strategic implications were terrifying. If humans had been establishing such installations for decades, they might have created an impregnable defensive network while appearing to be nothing more than peaceful colonists. But the most disturbing aspect of human military doctrine, Zektar said, is their approach to intelligence gathering. They do not simply spy on potential enemies, they study them with scientific precision. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional model of a Cytherian warrior, complete with detailed anatomical information, psychological profiles, and tactical assessments. The level of detail was extraordinary, including information that even Cytherian medical textbooks did not contain. This profile was created by human analysts who had never met a living Cytherian before our encounter, Zektar explained. They developed it entirely from intercepted communications, observational data, and theoretical modeling. They knew how we would react to specific stimuli, what tactical doctrines we would employ, and what psychological pressures would be most effective against us. General Krex spoke in a hollow voice. They created psychological warfare profiles for an entire species based on remote observation? Not just psychological profiles, Zektar corrected. Complete strategic assessments. They knew our ship designs better than our own engineers, our tactical doctrines better than our own generals, and our political structure better than our own diplomats. They had effectively reverse-engineered our entire civilization from the outside. The delegates exchanged alarmed glances. If humans could achieve such detailed understanding of alien species without direct contact, no civilization could consider its secrets safe. Sarah showed me similar profiles for dozens of galactic species, Zektar continued. The hegemony, the Trade Federation, the Crystal Collective, the machine consciousness. Humans had studied them all with the same scientific precision. They possessed detailed assessments of military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and political pressure points for every major galactic power. Delegate Shard of Morning Light chimed with growing alarm. How is such comprehensive intelligence gathering possible? Humans lack the technological capabilities for such extensive surveillance. That's what we assumed, Zektar replied. But humans have developed intelligence-gathering techniques that don't rely on advanced technology. They use what they call open-source intelligence, gathering information from publicly available sources and combining it with analytical techniques to create comprehensive assessments. The concept was revolutionary to species that relied primarily on covert surveillance and infiltration for intelligence gathering. The idea of extracting military secrets from public information seemed impossible. Sarah demonstrated the technique for me, Zektar continued. Using only publicly available trade records, she was able to determine the exact composition of our fleet, the location of our supply bases, and the likely timing of our attack. She showed me how commercial shipping manifests revealed military cargo, how personnel transfer records indicated operational planning, and how energy consumption patterns revealed the presence of classified installations. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as the delegates realized the vulnerability of their own information security. If humans could extract military intelligence from routine commercial data, traditional security measures were useless. But perhaps the most terrifying demonstration came when Sarah showed me their strategic planning process, Zektar said. Humans don't just prepare for wars they expect to fight, they prepare for wars they might never face. The display shifted to show a complex web of interconnected scenarios, each one representing a different potential conflict situation. The scope was staggering. Hundreds of possible wars, diplomatic crises, and military scenarios, each one analyzed and planned for in advance. They call it contingency planning, Zektar explained. Every possible enemy, every potential crisis, every conceivable military situation has been studied and prepared for. They have detailed plans for conflicts with species they have never met, in star systems they have never visited, using weapons that may not yet exist. The comprehensive nature of such planning was beyond the capabilities of most galactic civilizations. The idea of preparing for every possible contingency suggested a level of military paranoia that was both impressive and disturbing. During my final weeks in captivity, I was given access to what humans call their War College, an educational institution dedicated entirely to the study of military strategy and tactics, Zektar continued. What I learned there challenged every assumption I had ever held about warfare. The display showed the interior of a vast library filled with thousands of texts, recordings, and interactive simulations. Every wall was covered with maps, charts, and tactical displays representing conflicts from across human history. Humans have documented and studied every military conflict in their species' history, Zektar explained. They have preserved the tactical lessons from wars fought with primitive weapons, analyzed the strategic principles that determined the outcomes of ancient battles, and applied those lessons to modern military doctrine. The concept of learning from historical conflicts was not unknown to galactic civilizations, but the scope of human documentation was unprecedented. Most species recorded only their major victories and defeats. Humans appeared to have documented every conflict, no matter how small or insignificant. But the truly remarkable aspect of human military education, Zektar said, is that they study not just their own wars, but the conflicts of their enemies as well. They have detailed analyses of every major galactic conflict from the past 1,000 years, complete with tactical assessments and strategic alternatives. General Krex leaned forward in his pod. They have been studying our military history? Exhaustively, Zektar confirmed. I saw detailed analyses of the Vorthon expansion wars, complete with alternative strategies that might have changed their outcome. They had studied the Crystal Wars, the Synthetic Rebellion, even minor border conflicts that most species have forgotten. They understand our military capabilities better than we understand them ourselves. The implications sent chills through the assembled delegates. If humans had been studying galactic military history with such thoroughness, they might possess insights into warfare that no other species had ever considered. The instructors at the War College explained their philosophy to me, Zektar continued. They believe that every conflict, no matter how ancient or irrelevant it might seem, contains lessons that can be applied to future warfare. They study not just the tactics that succeeded, but the mistakes that led to defeat. He paused, remembering his conversations with human military theorists. One instructor told me that humans have identified over 3,000 distinct tactical principles from their study of galactic conflicts. They have cataloged every mistake we have made, every weakness we have revealed, and every strategic blind spot we have demonstrated. The chamber had grown deadly quiet as the delegates absorbed the terrifying scope of human military analysis. To have their own military history turned against them in such a comprehensive manner was a violation they had never imagined possible. But the most disturbing revelation, Zektar said, came when I asked why humans had invested so much effort in studying galactic warfare when they had remained isolationist for so long. The answer revealed the true scope of their strategic thinking. The display shifted to show a timeline of galactic history, with human activities marked in subtle patterns that most observers would never notice. The markings revealed a disturbing truth. Humans had been quietly involved in galactic affairs for far longer than anyone had suspected. Humans have been preparing for contact with galactic civilization for over 2 centuries, Zektar explained. They have been monitoring our communications, studying our conflicts, and analyzing our societies since shortly after they developed interstellar communication technology. The Tau Ceti colony was not an isolated settlement. It was the final test of human defensive capabilities before they revealed themselves to galactic society. The revelation hit the delegates like a physical blow. If humans had been monitoring galactic civilization for centuries, they possessed intelligence advantages that rendered traditional diplomatic and military approaches obsolete. The instructor who explained this to me made a statement that still haunts my dreams, Zektar concluded. He said that humans had learned from galactic history that peaceful species who were unprepared for war inevitably became victims of those who were prepared for nothing but war. They chose to become prepared for everything, so they could choose peace from a position of strength. As the implications of Zektar's expanded testimony sank in, the delegates began to understand that they faced not just a new military threat, but a species that had fundamentally redefined the nature of warfare itself. The question that now faced the galactic community was not how to fight humans, but whether fighting them was even theoretically possible. 7 standard galactic days had passed since Zektar's second testimony, and the War Council chamber had been transformed. Where once sat confident military leaders and diplomatic representatives, now gathered a collection of beings whose fundamental understanding of warfare, intelligence, and galactic security had been shattered. Emergency sessions had been called by every major power, military academies had suspended classes to review their curricula, and intelligence agencies across the galaxy were frantically reassessing their capabilities. Zektar stood before the assembly for what he had announced would be his final testimony. The weight of what he was about to reveal showed in every aspect of his bearing. His compound eyes had dulled to an almost lifeless amber, and his usually pristine chitinous armor showed signs of stress fractures that appeared when Catherians experienced extreme psychological pressure. "Honored delegates," Zektar began, his voice carrying a finality that silenced even the ambient noise of the life support systems. What I have shared with you thus far represents only the foundation of human military capability. Today, I will reveal the true scope of what we face, and why I believe our current understanding of warfare has become not just obsolete, but actively dangerous to the survival of galactic civilization. Admiral Thex, her crystalline form noticeably dimmer than in previous sessions, spoke with obvious reluctance. Soldier Zektar, our analysis teams have spent the past week attempting to verify your previous testimony. What they have discovered has caused several governments to place their military forces on high alert. If there is more, we must know. Zektar gestured toward the chamber's central display, which activated to show an image that made several delegates recoil in their atmospheric pods. It was a real-time view of the chamber itself, but the perspective was impossible. The image showed details that could only be captured from within the chamber, yet no recording devices were visible. This image, Zektar explained, is being transmitted to human observers in real time. They are watching this session as it occurs, analyzing our reactions and updating their assessments of galactic leadership capabilities. They have been monitoring our discussions since the first session began. The chamber erupted in alarmed exclamations from multiple species. General Krex's reptilian features had turned an ashen gray as he scanned the chamber for hidden surveillance equipment. Impossible. This facility has the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. No unauthorized technology could penetrate our defenses. No known technology, Zektar corrected. During my final days in human custody, I was introduced to what they call quantum surveillance, the ability to observe targets using principles of quantum mechanics that make detection virtually impossible. The devices transmitting this signal exist in quantum superposition, allowing them to gather information without interacting with normal matter in ways our sensors can detect. The concept was beyond the understanding of most galactic civilizations, which still relied on conventional electromagnetic and gravitational detection methods. The idea of surveillance devices that existed in quantum states was terrifying to species whose security depended on their ability to detect foreign technology. Sarah demonstrated the technology for me, Zektar continued. She showed me real-time images from inside heavily shielded hegemony facilities, private conversations between high-ranking officials, and classified military planning sessions. Humans have been observing galactic civilization with perfect clarity while remaining completely undetected. Delegate Quell pulsed with growing panic. How long have they been conducting this surveillance? According to Sarah, quantum observation systems have been in place for over 50 years, Zektar replied. Every major political decision, every military deployment, every diplomatic negotiation has been observed and analyzed by human intelligence services. They possess a complete record of galactic political and military development spanning half a century. The implications were staggering. If humans had been secretly observing galactic civilization for decades, they possessed intelligence advantages that made resistance seem futile. Every military secret, every diplomatic strategy, every technological development had been compromised from the moment of its creation. But quantum surveillance represents only one aspect of human intelligence superiority, Zektar said. The most terrifying capability I witnessed was their ability to predict and manipulate future events with mathematical precision. The display shifted to show a complex, three-dimensional model that resembled a vast web of interconnected probability chains. Each strand represented a different course of action or decision point, and the entire structure pulsed with mathematical calculations that were updated in real time. Humans call this predictive modeling, Zektar explained. Using their accumulated intelligence and quantum computing capabilities, they can calculate the probable outcomes of political and military decisions with extraordinary accuracy. They can predict not just what we will do, but when we will do it, how we will do it, and what the consequences will be. General Krex spoke in a voice that had lost all traces of his former confidence. You're describing precognition, not intelligence analysis. Not precognition, Zektar corrected. Mathematical modeling based on perfect information. When you know every variable that influences a decision, you can predict that decision with near-perfect accuracy. Humans have achieved this level of knowledge about galactic civilization. The distinction was important, but terrifying. Precognition would be a mystical ability that could be dismissed or rationalized. Mathematical prediction based on perfect intelligence was a scientific achievement that rendered conventional military and diplomatic strategies useless. Sarah demonstrated the system's capabilities by predicting the outcome of our current discussions, Zektar continued. Before I left human custody, she showed me a detailed projection of how the Galactic War Council would respond to my testimony. Her predictions have been accurate to within 97%. He gestured at the assembled delegates. She predicted that Admiral Thex would call for emergency military consultations after my first session. She predicted that General Krex would attempt to verify my claims by testing captured human technology. She predicted that Delegate Quell would propose diplomatic overtures to establish formal contact with human leadership. Each prediction had indeed come to pass, confirming the terrifying accuracy of human analytical capabilities. The delegates were beginning to understand that their every move was not just observed, but anticipated by human intelligence services. But the most disturbing prediction, Zektar said, concerned the likely response of galactic military forces to the revelation of human capabilities. According to human analysis, there is an 83% probability that one or more galactic powers will attempt a preemptive strike against human territories within the next 30 standard days. The accuracy of such a prediction was unnerving because it reflected exactly what many delegates had been privately considering. If humans possessed such overwhelming intelligence and military advantages, the logical response was to attack before they could consolidate their position. Sarah anticipated this reaction, Zektar continued, and she asked me to deliver a specific message to any military leaders who might be contemplating such action. That message represents the final revelation I am prepared to share with this council. The chamber fell into absolute silence as delegates prepared to hear what might be humanity's ultimate military secret. The message, Zektar said slowly, is that humans have already calculated the optimal response to every possible military action galactic civilization might take against them. They have prepared countermeasures not just for attacks they expect, but for attacks they consider unlikely. They are not merely ready for war. They have already won every war we might consider fighting. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for galactic military confidence. To claim that humans had already defeated enemies who had not yet attacked suggested capabilities beyond anything previously imagined. Sarah provided evidence to support this claim, Zektar continued. She showed me detailed battle plans for defensive actions against every major galactic military force. These were not theoretical exercises, but complete strategic documents that included precise timing, resource allocation, and casualty projections. The display showed fragments of these plans, complex documents that outlined human responses to hegemony fleet actions, crystalline harmonic weapons, Vorthon ground assaults, and dozen other military scenarios. The level of detail was extraordinary, including contingencies for weapon systems that were still in development by their respective civilizations. The plans revealed the true scope of human military preparation, Zektar explained. They have identified the optimal targets within our territory that would cripple our military capabilities without causing massive civilian casualties. They have calculated the precise application of force required to neutralize our defensive systems while preserving our infrastructure. They have even prepared rehabilitation programs for post-conflict reconstruction. The comprehensive nature of such planning was beyond anything previously conceived by galactic military strategists. The idea of planning not just for victory, but for the complete post-war reconstruction of enemy civilizations suggested a level of strategic thinking that redefined the concept of warfare. But the most chilling aspect of these plans, Zektar said, is their timeline projections. According to human calculations, they could achieve complete military victory over the combined forces of galactic civilization in approximately 72 standard hours. The time frame was so short that it challenged the basic assumptions of interstellar warfare. Most galactic conflicts lasted for months or years. The idea of decisive victory in mere days suggested capabilities that bordered on the impossible. When I questioned the feasibility of such rapid victory, Sarah explained the key advantages that make it possible, Zektar continued. First, humans possess perfect intelligence about our capabilities, positions, and likely responses. Second, they have developed weapons systems specifically designed to counter our defensive technologies. Third, they have established strategic positions throughout galactic space that would allow them to strike simultaneously at all critical targets. The revelation that humans had established strategic positions throughout galactic space was perhaps the most alarming news yet. If human forces were already in position for coordinated attacks, the window for effective resistance might have already closed. Sarah showed me the locations of these positions, Zektar said. What we had assumed were uninhabited systems, asteroid mining operations, or scientific research stations were actually human military installations. They have been building their strategic infrastructure for decades while maintaining perfect concealment. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of known space with human positions marked in red. The pattern was overwhelming. Nearly every critical system, trade route, and communication hub was within range of human military assets. The distribution of these installations, Zektar explained, allows humans to cut our supply lines, disrupt our communications, and isolate our military forces within hours of initiating hostilities. They have essentially surrounded us while we remained unaware of their presence. Delegate Shard of Morning Light chimed with desperation. Surely there must be some weakness, some vulnerability that could be exploited. Zektar's compound eyes fixed on the crystalline representative. I asked Sarah the same question. Her response was perhaps the most terrifying thing she ever told me. She said that humans had identified their own weaknesses and had developed strategies to turn those weaknesses into advantages. The concept of deliberately exploiting one's own vulnerabilities as a strategic weapon was so alien to conventional military thinking that most delegates struggled to comprehend it. Sarah explained with an example, Zektar continued. Humans appear to be physically inferior to most galactic species, weaker, slower, and more fragile. But they have turned this apparent weakness into what they call strategic misdirection. While enemies focus on their physical limitations, humans employ technological and tactical advantages that render physical superiority irrelevant. The Chamber's delegates began to understand that their entire approach to assessing human capabilities had been fundamentally flawed. By focusing on obvious human limitations, they had completely missed the development of technologies and strategies that made those limitations irrelevant. Another example involved human emotional responses, Zektar said. Humans appear to be highly emotional creatures, prone to irrational decisions based on feelings rather than logic, but Sarah revealed that human emotional responses are actually sophisticated survival mechanisms that enhance their military effectiveness. The idea that emotions could be military advantages contradicted the logical, calculated approach that most galactic civilizations brought to warfare. Humans call it emotional intelligence, Zektar explained. Their ability to understand and manipulate emotional responses allows them to predict enemy behavior, maintain morale under extreme stress, and adapt their tactics based on psychological rather than purely logical considerations. What appears to be a weakness is actually a sophisticated strategic capability. The revelation that human emotions were strategic assets rather than liabilities forced the delegates to reconsider every assumption they had made about human psychology and military effectiveness. But the final revelation, Zektar said, concerned the true purpose of human military preparation. When I asked Sarah why humans had invested so much effort in developing overwhelming military superiority, her answer revealed the ultimate truth about human strategy. He paused, gathering himself for what he clearly considered the most important part of his testimony. Sarah told me that humans had learned from galactic history that peace was only possible when all parties believed that war would be too costly to justify. Their goal was not to conquer galactic civilization, but to make conquest so obviously impossible that no one would attempt it. The concept of achieving peace through overwhelming strength was familiar to many galactic civilizations, but the scope of human implementation was unprecedented. Humans call this strategy absolute deterrence, Zektar continued. By demonstrating capabilities so far beyond anything we possess that resistance becomes mathematically impossible, they hope to achieve permanent peace without ever having to use those capabilities. Admiral Thex's form pulsed with a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. And if we choose not to accept their deterrence? Zektar met her crystalline gaze directly. Then they will win the war in 72 hours and spend the next century helping us rebuild our civilizations according to principles that will prevent future conflicts. Sarah made it clear that humans prefer cooperation to conquest, but they are prepared for either outcome. The choice facing galactic civilization was now clear. Accept human supremacy and negotiate from a position of complete disadvantage, or fight a war they could not win against an enemy that had already planned for their post-defeat rehabilitation. Before my release, Zektar concluded, Sarah gave me one final message for this council. She said that humanity extends an invitation to join what they call a Galactic Peace Initiative, a cooperative framework for resolving conflicts without warfare. They believe that their military supremacy provides the stability necessary for such cooperation to succeed. Delegate Quell pulsed slowly as the full implications became clear. And if we refuse this invitation? Zektar's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then we will discover whether their 72-hour timeline is accurate. But based on everything I witnessed during my captivity, I believe that resistance would not be just futile, but actively harmful to the long-term survival of our civilizations. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as the delegates absorbed the full scope of what Zektar had revealed. Humanity had not simply developed superior military capabilities, they had redefined warfare itself, turning it from an instrument of conquest into a tool for achieving permanent peace through overwhelming deterrence. My recommendation to this council, Zektar said in closing, is that we accept the human invitation and begin negotiations immediately. Because the alternative is not just military defeat, but the revelation that everything we thought we knew about warfare, strategy, and galactic power was an illusion that humans allowed us to maintain until they were ready to reveal the truth. As Zektar's final words echoed through the crystalline chamber, the assembled delegates faced the most consequential decision in galactic history, whether to accept humanity's offer of cooperation or to test the accuracy of their military predictions. Either way, the age of galactic innocence about the true nature of warfare was over, ended not by conquest, but by the terrifying revelation that conquest had already become impossible before anyone realized the war had begun. The silence that followed would mark the end of one era of galactic civilization and the beginning of another, an era in which humanity's redefinition of warfare would determine whether the galaxy's future would be shaped by cooperation or by the swift surgical demonstration of military capabilities beyond anything previously imagined. In that silence, every delegate understood that they were no longer debating military strategy or diplomatic policy. They were choosing between two versions of the future, one in which humanity's strength guaranteed peace, and another in which that strength would be demonstrated with mathematical precision and terrifying efficiency. The choice, as Zektar had made clear, would determine not just the fate of their civilizations, but whether those civilizations would be allowed to learn from their defeat, or would simply be rebuilt according to human principles of permanent peace. The age of galactic warfare, as they had known it, was already over. The only question remaining was how long it would take them to accept that reality.